My stepson killed my therapy dog, so I gave him a brutal reality check. I'm a 42-year-old former Marine with PTSD, and my therapy dog Rex has kept me alive for 4 years. When I married Georgia 3 years ago, I thought I'd found my second chance, but her 17-year-old son Darius made it clear he wanted me gone. The only thing Darius hates more than me is Rex, because he knows that dog is the only thing standing between me and complete breakdown. Last month, I was having a panic attack in the kitchen, my chest tight and hands shaking when Rex pressed against me doing his trained pressure therapy. Darius walked in, rolled his eyes, and said, "Jesus, here we go again with the drama queen and his emotional support mutt." Georgia came in and saw me struggling, but instead of helping, she looked embarrassed and told Darius, "Not now," like I was the problem. My heart sank because Darius controlled this house, and Georgia would always choose his comfort over my survival. Darius called Rex a fake service dog, and learned that attacking my military service always got the biggest reaction. So he said things like, "My real dad never needed a therapy animal. Maybe if you were a better soldier, you wouldn't be so broken." I've tried everything to connect with this kid, but at family dinners he'd smirk and say, "Why would you care what I do? You probably won't be around long enough since mom's track record with men is pathetic." Georgia would say, "Darius, stop," but her voice was always weak, never backing it up with consequences. Everything exploded last week when I had my worst panic attack in months and collapsed in our driveway. Georgia rushed me to the emergency room where they kept me overnight for heart monitoring. Darius showed up at the hospital with fake concern, asking if he could have friends over since I'd be gone anyway. When I said no, he started yelling loud enough for everyone to stare, saying that I was controlling. Georgia dragged him outside, then came back in saying Darius made good points about our rules being unfair. Lying there with wires on my chest, I realized my wife would sacrifice my medical needs to avoid confronting her son. I came home to find our house reeking of beer, and Rex was gone. Darius was lounging in his room when I asked where Rex was. He didn't look up as he said, "Oh, Rex got out last night. Someone left the gate open." I spent 5 days in hell searching for Rex, calling every shelter and driving until my hands cramped. Day 3, our neighbor mentioned seeing Darius load a large dog into his car during the party, but wasn't sure. My blood went cold. Day 4, I checked our phone records and found Darius had called 3 shelters the night I was hospitalized. Day 5, the 3rd shelter confirmed Rex had been surrendered by a family member claiming he'd bitten people and was euthanized that morning. I dropped the phone and collapsed sobbing because Darius had murdered my lifeline. When I confronted Darius with the phone records, his fake concern disappeared. I found his text thread where he'd written about figuring out the best way to get rid of my dog. His friend wrote back saying, "Just say it bit you. They'll put it down." And Darius replied, "Already researched which shelters euthanize the fastest." When I showed Georgia the evidence, her first reaction was defensive, saying Darius must have been scared, and maybe this was a blessing because I'd become too dependent. That's when my heart shattered. Something cold from my military days took over. I stood there in our living room, Georgia's words echoing in my head, a blessing. She'd called Rex's murder a blessing. My breathing shifted, becoming the mechanical rhythm I'd learned in boot camp. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. The same breathing that got me through firefights in Fallujah now helped me process that my wife had just sided with her son over my survival. Georgia took a step back, her eyes widening as she watched me go completely still. The trembling stopped. The panic disappeared. Everything compressed into a cold, focused point. Darius emerged from his room, probably drawn by the sudden silence. I turned to face him, my voice coming out in measured tones that made Georgia flinch. I told him I knew exactly what he'd done, how he'd planned it, executed it, and tried to cover it up. His usual smirk started forming until he looked into my eyes. The smirk died. He saw something there that made him understand he'd pushed too far. Georgia tried to step between us, her hands raised in that mediating gesture she always used. I cut her off mid-sentence, telling her she'd chosen her side when she called Rex's death a blessing. My wedding ring suddenly felt like it weighed 50 pounds. That's when Jake's text popped up on Darius's phone screen. The message was brief, but damning. Did the plan work? Is the dog gone? My hand moved faster than Darius expected. I grabbed my phone and snapped a photo of his screen before he could react. His hand trembled as he snatched his phone away, but it was too late. I had the evidence. Georgia's voice turned shrill, demanding I leave the house for the night to cool down. I agreed immediately, which seemed to surprise both of them. They expected resistance, anger, maybe even violence. Instead, I walked calmly to the garage. The garage light flickered on, illuminating Darius's car. I circled it slowly, my trained eye catching details others might miss. Fresh scratches along the trunk's edge, deep ones, the kind an animal might make fighting for its life. Rex had fought back. Footsteps behind me. Darius stood in the doorway, his face pale as he watched me examine his car. The security camera's red light blinked steadily in the corner. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. I heard him leaving a voicemail for Jake about needing to handle something important right now. My phone buzzed. Marcus, my buddy from the VA support group, checking in. Word travels fast in veteran circles, and someone had mentioned seeing me at the hospital. I typed back that I was okay, but Rex was gone. His response was immediate. He'd be at the coffee shop tomorrow if I needed to talk. I moved some boxes in the garage, searching. Behind the recycling bin, I found it. Rex's collar, stuffed deep in the trash. Blood on the buckle. The tags were still warm from the afternoon sun. My hands shook as I photographed it from every angle. My phone rang. Helen, Georgia's sister. Her voice was sympathetic but firm. Georgia had called her, asking her to talk sense into me. Helen launched into a speech about how teenage boys make mistakes, how I needed to forgive and move forward. I listened without responding, documenting the call. Later, I sat in my truck outside a motel, scrolling through the family iPad I'd grabbed. An old text conversation between Darius and Georgia appeared, dated 2 months ago. "When are you going to choose, him or me?" The response from Georgia was telling in what it didn't say. By morning, Darius had started his campaign. Extended family members began calling, expressing concern about threats I'd allegedly made. According to Darius's version, Rex had simply run away and I'd lost my mind, threatening a child over an accident. My VA therapy appointment notification popped up, then immediately showed as canceled. A follow-up email cited a concerning call about my stability as the reason. Even my psychiatrist dismissed my request for an emergency session, mentioning that treating both Georgia and me created a conflict of interest. The realization hit. Darius had known this would limit my options. I drove to the shelter, pretending to search for a lost dog. The worker at the desk, Jackie, recognized Darius's description immediately. Her expression shifted when I mentioned him, though she couldn't share details due to policy. She did mention his demeanor had seemed rehearsed, like he'd practiced his story. Her eyes said more than her words could. Meeting Marcus at the coffee shop, he noticed the bruises on my arms from where I'd hit the ground during my driveway collapse. Other veterans at nearby tables exchanged knowing glances. We don't abandon our own. Marcus helped me piece together a pattern. Cross-referencing dates, we found Darius had called shelters during my 2 previous hospital visits. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. At the grocery store, a young woman approached me, Melissa, Jake's girlfriend. She glanced around nervously before telling me Jake had been acting strange since the party, jumpy and avoiding Darius. I suggested Jake might be in trouble, that sometimes people get pulled into things they don't want to do. She nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. She'd help if she could. Darius must have been watching, because Melissa's phone buzzed immediately after she left. She showed me the screen at the next aisle, a warning from Darius to stay away from me. That evening, Helen called again. Her tone had changed completely. She'd found something in Georgia's old emails, something disturbing she needed to discuss in person. I met Helen at a small diner across town the following morning. She slid into the booth carrying a manila folder, her face drawn with worry. She opened it to reveal printed emails from 3 years ago, exchanges between Georgia and her ex-husband. The messages detailed incidents involving Darius and neighborhood pets. My stomach churned as I read about dead rabbits found in their backyard, a neighbor's cat that went missing after Darius was seen near their property. Georgia's ex had documented everything, begging her to get Darius help. Her responses minimized each incident, called them accidents, blamed the other children for provoking him. Helen pushed a police report across the table. The neighbor with the rabbits had filed it, but Georgia convinced them to drop the matter. The ex-husband left 2 months later. Helen's hands shook as she explained how she'd kept quiet to protect her sister, but watching me search for Rex had broken something in her. She'd seen this pattern before. I photographed every document while Helen watched the door nervously. She mentioned their mother knew about the incidents too. Darius's grandmother lived in a retirement community 40 minutes away. Helen promised to arrange a meeting. Back at the motel, I uploaded everything to multiple cloud storage accounts. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Georgia. I ignored them and opened my laptop to check Darius's social media. He'd posted a tearful tribute to Rex, complete with old photos from when I first brought Rex home. The post claimed I was refusing to help search for our beloved family pet who'd mysteriously vanished. Comments poured in from Georgia's friends, expressing sympathy and concern about my concerning behavior. I screenshot everything, noting the timestamp. The manipulation was textbook. Control the narrative. Paint yourself as the victim. Isolate your target. I'd seen it in toxic unit commanders, in abusive relationships among my fellow veterans, but seeing it from a 17-year-old was chilling. Marcus texted that his wife Sarah, who worked as a veterinary technician, could explain the shelter's procedures. I met them at their house that afternoon. Sarah pulled up the shelter's website, showing me their intake forms. She explained how specific terminology triggered different protocols. The phrase bite history combined with aggressive behavior fast-tracked euthanasia, especially for larger dogs. Shelters couldn't risk liability. Darius had known exactly which words to use. Sarah's face darkened as she described how terrified Rex must have been. Strange place, strange smells, no familiar faces. She excused herself, wiping her eyes. Marcus gripped my shoulder, reminding me that brothers don't abandon brothers. My phone buzzed. Melissa sent a voice recording. Jake's voice came through shaky and tearful. He described how Darius had called him during my hospital stay, asking him to help with something important. Jake thought they were moving furniture. Instead, Darius had Rex on a leash, claiming they needed to take him to a better home while I was sick. Jake helped load Rex into Darius's car, not understanding until later what had really happened. The recording captured Jake saying he couldn't live with the guilt anymore, that Darius had threatened to ruin his college prospects if he talked. I saved multiple copies of the recording, then texted Melissa my gratitude. She responded that Jake wanted to make things right but was terrified of Darius. I assured her I'd protect them both. That evening, I parked down the street from my house, watching. Darius left around 7, driving toward Jake's neighborhood. I followed at a distance, documenting his route. He parked outside Jake's house for 20 minutes, then drove to 2 other friends' homes, building his narrative, controlling the story. The next morning brought a wellness check from local police. 2 officers arrived at my motel, polite but firm. Someone had called expressing concern about my mental state and potential for violence. I remained calm, showed them my VA identification, explained I was staying at the motel temporarily due to family issues. They seemed satisfied, but I knew this was just Darius's opening move. Marcus spread word among our veteran community. Within hours, I had messages of support from dozens of brothers and sisters. One offered legal consultation, another had connections at animal welfare organizations. The network activated, protective and fierce. I returned to routine surveillance, documenting Darius's patterns. He met with Jake twice more, their body language tense. Jake looked haggard, constantly checking over his shoulder. After the second meeting, Melissa texted that Jake had broken down, saying he couldn't pretend anymore. 3 days after Helen's revelation, I met Darius's grandmother at her retirement community. She was sharp, direct, and unsurprised by my story. She led me to her small apartment and pulled out a photo album. Flipping to a specific page, she showed me a picture of a tabby cat. Her voice stayed steady as she described finding it dead in her garage during a visit 5 years ago. Darius had been 12. She'd caught him standing over it, studying it with detached curiosity. No remorse, no explanation, just cold observation. She'd tried to tell Georgia, but her daughter accused her of being dramatic. The grandmother started keeping distance after that, protecting herself from what she recognized as something deeply wrong with her grandson. She provided a written statement about the incident, her handwriting steady despite the painful memories. My phone rang constantly now. Georgia, various family members, numbers I didn't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail, building a record of their increasingly frantic messages. Some expressed concern, others made threats about legal action if I didn't stop harassing Darius. At the grocery store, I ran into several neighbors. Word had spread through the community. Mrs. Chen mentioned her missing chickens from last year. Mr. Rodriguez described finding his daughter's guinea pig dead under suspicious circumstances. They'd all suspected, but never had proof. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Melissa met me at a park, bringing Jake with her. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking. He told his story directly this time. Darius had been planning Rex's removal for months, researching shelters, studying their policies. The night of my collapse was just convenient timing. Jake produced his own phone, showing me texts from Darius with detailed instructions about what to say if questioned. The messages included threats about Jake's scholarship applications, reminders that Darius's mother worked at the school district and could make things difficult. I thanked Jake for his courage, assuring him that doing the right thing mattered more than any threat. Melissa recorded our entire conversation with Jake's permission, creating another piece of evidence. That afternoon, I attended a family dinner at Georgia's insistence, maintaining my composure despite the churning in my gut. I sat quietly while Darius played the concerned stepson, asking about my well-being with practiced sincerity. Georgia watched my hands constantly, as if expecting violence. I ate methodically, responded politely, gave them nothing to use against me. During dessert, Darius made a calculated error. He mentioned details about the shelter's location that he shouldn't have known if Rex had simply run away. Georgia caught it too, her fork pausing midway to her mouth. The silence stretched until Darius quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. After dinner, Darius approached me in the driveway with an offer to help search for Rex together. His performance was flawless, concerned eyes, helpful demeanor. I declined politely, watching his mask slip for just a moment before he recovered. He was getting desperate. The next week, Darius's carefully constructed world began crumbling. Jake stopped responding to his messages. Other friends grew distant after Jake privately shared the truth. Screenshot of Darius's old messages circulated through their friend group. The social isolation he'd weaponized against me was turning back on him. College application deadlines loomed. Darius needed recommendation letters from teachers, counselors, community leaders. One by one, they became mysteriously unavailable. Word spreads in small communities. People talk. Teachers who'd heard whispers about animal incidents grew reluctant to stake their reputations on him. I documented everything meticulously. Every interaction, every piece of evidence, every witness statement. The file grew thick with proof of a pattern spanning years. Marcus helped me organize it chronologically, creating an undeniable timeline of escalating behavior. George's coworkers started asking subtle questions. Someone had seen my social media posts about searching for Rex, noticed the discrepancy with Darius's version. Her professional facade cracked under the scrutiny. She called in sick repeatedly, unable to face the questions. Helen and their mother coordinated behind the scenes. The grandmother's testimony carried weight, a matriarch confirming what others had suspected. Extended family members who'd initially supported Darius began pulling back as more stories surfaced. I visited my veterinarian, obtaining Rex's complete medical history. 10 years of records showing no aggression, no bite incidents, nothing but a gentle therapy dog who'd saved my life countless times. The vet provided a sworn statement about Rex's temperament, adding professional credibility to personal testimony. Darius's attempts to regain control grew increasingly desperate. He posted volatile messages on social media, deleted them, posted again. His friend group fragmented as some chose loyalty, while others couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. The isolation he'd inflicted on others was becoming his reality. During another tense family dinner, Darius's mask slipped completely. Frustrated by his shrinking social circle and failed college applications, he lashed out at Georgia, blaming her for not controlling the narrative better. I watched Georgia's face as she realized she was seeing her son clearly for the first time in years. The school counselor reached out after 3 separate students reported concerns about Darius's behavior. His carefully maintained image at school was cracking. Teachers noticed the changes, the barely controlled anger, the increasing isolation. Natural consequences were closing in from all directions. Marcus organized a support gathering for me. 8 veterans showed up at his house, sharing stories of loss and betrayal, reminding me that survival meant more than revenge. They offered resources, lawyers, counselors, safe houses if needed. The brotherhood wrapped around me, protective and understanding. Melissa provided another recording. Jake had finally told his parents everything. They were horrified, immediately cutting contact with Darius and supporting their son's decision to tell the truth. The recording captured Jake's relief at being free from the secret, his determination to make amends. I encountered Darius at the grocery store. He approached aggressively until he noticed other shoppers watching. I quoted his own text messages back to him, word for word, maintaining eye contact. His bravado crumbled. He backed away, leaving his cart abandoned in the aisle. The evidence file was now comprehensive. Photos, recordings, witness statements, professional documentation, timeline analysis, everything cross-referenced and verified. The pattern was undeniable. Escalating violence against animals, sophisticated manipulation, lack of remorse. Georgia witnessed the final crack in Darius's facade when Jake came to their house to return borrowed items. Darius cornered him in the driveway, making threats that Georgia overheard through the kitchen window. She dropped her coffee mug, the crash punctuating the moment her denial shattered completely. Helen arranged the meeting with their mother and Georgia. I presented the evidence systematically, laying out the timeline from the rabbits to Rex. Georgia sat silent, tears streaming as she recognized incidents she'd explained away, patterns she'd refused to see. Their mother confirmed each story, adding details Georgia had never known. The shelter provided additional documentation through Jackie's careful record-keeping. She'd noted discrepancies in Darius's story, his rehearsed delivery, the specific terminology he'd used. Her informal notes painted a picture of calculated deception. Veterans from Marcus's network offered unexpected support. A lawyer provided pro bono consultation. A counselor specializing in trauma helped me process the grief without letting it consume me. A security expert helped me protect my digital evidence and maintain safety protocols. Darius's biological father's family reached out through his mother. They'd maintained distance for years but felt compelled to share their experiences. Similar incidents, similar patterns, similar denials. The genetic or environmental origins didn't matter. What mattered was the consistent behavior across different households. As his support system crumbled, Darius made increasingly desperate moves. He tried manipulating me using PTSD triggers, mentioning specific combat scenarios he'd researched, but I recognized the tactics, responding with pity rather than anger. He had no power over me anymore. The college recommendation deadline passed without a single letter submitted. Darius's carefully planned future collapsed. His acceptance letters would be worthless without the required recommendations. Natural consequences achieved what confrontation couldn't. Georgia finally admitted the truth during a private conversation. She'd been afraid of Darius for years, recognizing something cold in him, but unable to face it. She'd sacrificed relationships, ignored warnings, enabled escalating behavior, because acknowledging the truth meant admitting her failure as a mother. The community support was overwhelming. Neighbors shared their own suspicions and experiences. Georgia's co-workers offered resources for family intervention. Even strangers who'd heard the story through social networks expressed sympathy and support for holding Darius accountable. All the evidence compiled into a single comprehensive document. Every incident, every witness, every professional opinion. The pattern spread across years was undeniable when viewed completely. No single incident seemed extreme, but together they painted a disturbing picture. Helen discovered more emails from Georgia's ex-husband. He'd tried warning the family years ago, documenting his concerns about Darius's behavior. He'd left not from lack of love, but from fear of what Darius might do next. His prescient warnings had been dismissed as jealousy. The final piece of evidence came from Georgia herself. She found Darius's laptop open, his search history visible. Months of research about animal control laws, shelter policies, euthanasia procedures. Searches dated back to long before my hospitalization. This hadn't been impulsive. It had been methodically planned. The weight of truth was crushing, but necessary. Every supporter who'd wavered came back after seeing the full picture. The isolation Darius had tried to create around me had reversed completely. He was the one alone now, facing the consequences of his actions. As I sat in Marcus's living room, surrounded by brothers who'd stood by me, I felt something shift. The cold rage that had sustained me was giving way to something else. Not forgiveness, that would take time, but clarity. Rex was gone, but his death had exposed a truth that needed revealing. The little boy who'd called rabbits had grown into a young man capable capable of calculated cruelty, but he'd been stopped before he could escalate further. The evidence was complete. The community was aware. The family could no longer deny the pattern. What came next would require careful consideration, balancing justice with the possibility of intervention. But for now, the truth was finally in the open, undeniable and documented. Helen called one final time. The family was ready to meet, to decide how to move forward. Darius's grandmother would host at her apartment, neutral ground for what would either be an intervention or an ultimatum. The stage was set for whatever came next. The truth had weight, and it pressed down on everyone at Helen's apartment that evening. Georgia arrived first, her movements mechanical as she set down her purse and avoided eye contact. Darius followed 20 minutes later, his confidence intact until he saw his grandmother sitting at the dining table with a manila folder in front of her. Helen had arranged chairs in a semicircle. Marcus stood by the window, his presence a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. Jake and Melissa sat together near the door, Jake's parents flanking them protectively. The room filled slowly. Georgia's ex-husband's sister, two of Darius's former teachers, even Mrs. Chen from down the street. Each person carried evidence, documentation, memories they'd kept silent about for too long. Darius's posture shifted when he realized this wasn't a family discussion, but an intervention. His eyes darted between faces, calculating escape routes and manipulation tactics. Georgia reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his mask beginning to crack. The grandmother opened her folder first. Photos of her tabby cat, veterinary records, the police report she'd filed but never pursued. Her voice remained steady as she described finding Darius in her garage 5 years ago, the way he'd studied the dead animal with clinical detachment. No tears, no explanation, just observation. Helen presented the emails from Georgia's ex-husband next. Years of documented concerns, incidents with neighborhood pets, the escalating pattern Georgia had dismissed as childhood curiosity. The ex-husband's sister added her own testimony, finding their rabbit dead after Darius's visit, the way he'd helped bury it with unsettling enthusiasm. Mrs. Chen described her missing chickens. Mr. Rodriguez talked about his daughter's guinea pig. Each story built upon the last, creating an undeniable timeline. The teachers shared their observations. Dead birds found near Darius's usual lunch spot. His disturbing creative writing assignments that they'd flagged but never formally reported. Jake's testimony came next. His parents had prepared a written statement, but Jake insisted on standing, on facing Darius directly. He described the phone call, the deception, loading Rex into the car while believing they were helping. His voice broke when he explained how Darius had threatened his college prospects, manipulated him into silence. Melissa held his hand as he detailed the text messages, the calculated planning, the specific terminology Darius had researched to ensure Rex's death. I presented my evidence methodically. Phone records, text screenshots, the shelter documentation Jackie had carefully preserved. Rex's veterinary history showing 10 years without a single aggressive incident. The security camera footage from our garage showing Darius disposing of Rex's collar. Each piece fit into the larger pattern, impossible to dismiss individually or collectively. Throughout the presentation, Darius's demeanor shifted from confident to cornered. He attempted interruptions, tried to twist narratives, claimed misunderstandings, but the sheer volume of evidence, the number of witnesses, the documented pattern spanning years, it was overwhelming. His usual tactics failed against united truth. Georgia sat frozen, absorbing the reality she'd avoided for 17 years. Her face cycled through denial, recognition, and finally, devastating acceptance. She saw the incidents she'd explained away, the warnings she'd dismissed, the pattern she'd enabled through willful blindness. When the evidence concluded, Darius attempted one final manipulation. He stood abruptly, moving toward the door while announcing he was calling his biological father, threatening to report George's drinking habits and demand custody changes. The room tensed, but his grandmother simply opened another folder. Inside were emails from Darius's biological father, dating back 3 years. He documented similar concerns during Darius's visits, missing pets in his neighborhood, suspicious incidents, behavioral red flags. He'd stopped requesting visitation not from lack of love, but from genuine fear of what his son might become without intervention. Darius's last card crumbled. He returned to his chair, the reality of his isolation sinking in. No allies remained, no narratives to control, no escape routes, just the truth, documented and witnessed by everyone who mattered. The discussion turned to consequences and solutions. Marcus's lawyer friend had researched options. Criminal charges were possible, but would likely result in minimal juvenile penalties. The focus shifted to intervention, to preventing escalation before Darius aged out of juvenile protections. A residential treatment program specializing in conduct disorders emerged as the primary option. Expensive, intensive, but necessary. Georgia's insurance would cover partial costs. The community rallied, offering to help with expenses. Even Darius's teachers, despite their concerns, wanted to see him get help rather than face prosecution. Darius initially refused, launching into threats about self-harm if forced into treatment. His grandmother, who'd raised 4 children and buried 2 husbands, simply looked at him with steady eyes and told him manipulation wouldn't work anymore. The room's united front held firm. The ultimatum was clear: voluntary treatment or criminal charges. The evidence would be preserved either way. Jackie had agreed to testify about Rex's surrender. Jake's recordings were admissible. The pattern of animal cruelty crossed into felony territory with proper prosecution. Faced with united opposition and real consequences, Darius's resistance crumbled. He agreed to treatment, though his agreement came with sullen resentment rather than genuine recognition. It was a start, even if not the breakthrough everyone hoped for. Georgia filed separation papers the following week, recognizing she needed her own therapy before she could effectively parent. She moved in with Helen temporarily, beginning the difficult work of understanding how she'd enabled her son's escalation through denial and avoidance. The treatment facility admitted Darius 10 days later. 90-day minimum program with potential extensions based on progress. No phone privileges initially, limited family contact, intensive therapeutic intervention. The staff specialized in conduct disorders and had experience with similar cases. I returned to the empty house, Rex's absence echoing in every room. Marcus helped me pack essentials while I searched for a small apartment. The marriage was over, not from lack of love, but from fundamental incompatibility in values and priorities. Georgia had chosen her son's comfort over my survival once too often. 3 months passed. Darius remained in treatment, his progress reports mixed but showing marginal improvement. Georgia continued therapy, beginning to understand her role in enabling his behavior. We communicated only through lawyers as divorce proceedings moved forward. The veteran community that had supported me through the crisis remained constant. Marcus introduced me to a rescue organization specializing in matching veterans with dogs needing homes. That's where I met Rosie, a 2-year-old shepherd mix who'd been returned twice for being too attached to her owners. Rosie had her own trauma history, abandoned, abused, trust issues with strangers, but she recognized something in me, the same brokenness Rex had seen. We understood each other other's damage. Marcus helped with the adoption paperwork while his wife Sarah provided veterinary care. Training Rosie became my focus. Not to replace Rex, that was impossible, but to honor his memory by helping another dog find purpose. She learned quickly, intuiting my panic attacks before they peaked, providing the same pressure therapy Rex had perfected. Together, we began visiting the VA, working with other veterans who needed that connection. 6 months after that intervention at Helen's apartment, I stood in my small living room watching Rosie work with a young Marine who'd lost his leg in Afghanistan. She pressed against him as his breathing quickened, grounding him in the present. He looked at me with wonder, asking how she knew exactly what he needed. I thought about Rex, about the journey that brought me here, about truth finally exposed and consequences faced. Darius remained in treatment, his path uncertain, but at least redirected from its darkest trajectory. Georgia continued her own healing, learning to see clearly after years of self-imposed blindness. The community that had rallied around truth remained connected, checking in regularly. My phone buzzed. Marcus, asking if Rosie and I could help with a new veteran struggling with crowds. I confirmed, gathering Rosie's vest and lead. We had work to do, lives to touch, healing to facilitate. Rex's collar sat on my mantle, a reminder of love lost but purpose found. The door closed behind us as we headed to the VA. Another day, another veteran in need, another chance to transform trauma into service. Rex was gone, but his legacy lived on through every life Rosie touched. That was the only resolution that mattered, not revenge or justice, but continuation of the love Rex had shown me, now passed forward to others who needed it most.